It's very interesting that when I first was sent to Pakistan from Saudi Arabia, so in the madrasa for the madrasa students. So, um, so the one of the first things that I was given to teach in the madrasa was sirah, and I was so happy about that. Yeah, I think I can do that. Yeah. We just have to push start, right?
Yes.
And there we are. Turn computer audio. And so we're live, right?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
And then you can share your screen.
Yeah, I want to share my screen. Okay. Okay. So as I was saying, oh yeah. So, are there more? Is everybody in the background? Everybody's out here.
No, that's all.
Everybody's out here? Okay. So you can hear now, okay? So I was just saying that, the Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Wassalatu wassalamu ala sayyidil mursaleen, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in, amma ba'd. So I was just mentioning was asking the physical attendance, Alhamdulillah, Shukr Lillah, that we have actually physical class again in the masjid. In Ramadan, it's started to appear and manifest, and now, Alhamdulillah. So we hope that this will expand. This is the second major, operation of the masjid. Establishment of ibadat, establishment of salat, masjid, the place of sajda, the place of salat, the place of dhikrullah, the place to learn about Allah, the place to learn about tawheed and to learn about deen. So this is the place, and so by the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, now we have that opportunity once again. So we should take full advantage of that. As the saying goes, if you don't use it, you lose it. Right? So if we don't take advantage, and show appreciation to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for, granting us again the ability and the opportunity to assemble in His houses. If we don't take advantage of that, then perhaps, not showing proper gratitude, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, if we don't show gratitude, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's punishment is very severe. And the first punishment that will take place is that we are stripped from that ni'mah, that blessing. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala save us all from that. So we're also saying that the people of Iman, their love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is above everything. And after the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the love of Rasul is above everything and everyone. Right? And one of the indicators that we love Rasul is we love his seerah, we love his history, we love anything connected with him, shama'il, his characteristics, his habits, every aspect of his life. It should be something that we would sacrifice everything just to, gain that. And now we have, these opportunities to come to the masjid and actually participate in this. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us all tawfiq. People used to travel for days, perhaps weeks, perhaps months, to hear one saying of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And here we can, hear, about Quran and about Hadith and about Sirah, Saluk and everything. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us all tawfiq to appreciate that. So now, also I mentioned that those who haven't, or just joining, or they've missed some of the episodes, so I would humbly request, but sort of emphasize my request that try and go back and see the ones that you've missed, because they're all there on my YouTube channel. You can see them there. Shaykh Hashim Ahmad YouTube channel, you can see them. And inshallah, try and catch up, because we're on the 13th chapter now, or the 13th halaqah. And so, if you can go back and see those 12 that you missed, it will be good, because all of these build on, as we mentioned earlier, that the earlier history that we talked about, it keeps on, manifesting in various ways. Okay? Allah give us all tawfiq. So, We were talking about Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam in his infancy and then in his early childhood and now in his early manhood. Now as Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has now entering into his early manhood, his teens, if you will. So the first significant thing that they mention in the books of Sirah, of the events at that time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, was Harb al-Fijar, which basically translate the war of Fijar. Of Fijar means, disobedience, and Fusuk and Fujar and Fujur means, very manifest disobedience and disregard to the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and human values. And so this Harb, and why it was called that, we're soon to find out inshallah. So before we talk about Harb al-Hijab, we'll talk about Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, something about his tabi'ah, his own given nature that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him. Number one is that, as we mentioned perhaps earlier also, Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam was not involved at no point in time or accepted in no point of time the concepts of Jahiliyyah, and the most important and most atrocious of those concepts was the concept of idolatry. And so Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam never bought into that concept and never subscribed to it and never participated in their events. And there was one event which was mentioned in books of Sirah that Ayman, who was his nurse, who used to attend there was a ceremony that they used to have, the Quraysh paying homage to an idol named Buwaba. Who was Buwaba? What was Buwaba? Where he originated from? Allah only knows. In any case, Baltil min la Baltil. So, so there was a festival that would be held annually in the honor of this idol, and so Ayman, on the, according to the traditions of her people, she would attend that, and she used to always ask, Nabi alayhi sallam, who was as like her son, and in fact he was his son in Rida, as you can say. You should come and you should join, and so he never would agree to that. And then finally, his aunts actually, and Abu Talib also used to attend that. He used to also tell his nephew that you should come and attend, but he wouldn't agree to do so. So ultimately, his aunts, they spoke to him. What, you're disrespecting our idols, and you're disrespecting our tradition. This is very bad, and we are the most honorable of all of Quraysh, and you are the scion of the most honorable family, and you're not attending these functions. Which is, we can also draw on that, because we also have, even as Muslims, we have some of these, although they may not be altogether idolatrous, but in many cases they're very ludicrous. Some of these gatherings that we have, in terms of weddings, in terms of this event or that event or whatever, it becomes, it goes totally out of proportion, out of perspective of Islam and its teachings, and so some of our own Muslim brothers and sisters, they go under pressure because they don't attend these sorts of functions, and then their family, you're disrespecting the family. We're not, either we disrespect the tradition or we disrespect Allah Jalla Jalaluhu and His orders, and Nabi Sallallahu and His Sunnah. So, which disrespect holds weightier on the scale. So in any case, so Nabi Sallallahu, he was not prepared to do that. In any case, they kept on pushing. He said, okay. So he finally conceded to attend, one gathering. And something similar, perhaps we mentioned that earlier, that his friends, used to be at him, that, you're not joining also our functions, the youth used to sit around and have some sort of partying type of, event. And Nabi Sallallahu was least interested. And finally they and on his way to that, to see, some of that type of festivities. So he, went unconscious and then woke up and then went back. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is from the Isma also, of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that special protection that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protects His prophets, from all types of major sin and omissions. So anyway, so he went to that, being pushed and pressured by his relatives, particularly his aunts, who were very, as we say, Aziz Ali, they were very, honorable to him. So he said, okay, let me just, for the sake of the ties of kinship. So then he mentions that every time he went to that idol, and then ultimately he came running back, home. And he was crying and he was, stressed out. So there's that. I said, what happened? He said, every time I came near to that idol, for the festivity, so I saw this tall white man telling me, hold back, don't touch this. I riwayat again, riwayat of this. In any case, very plausible. So in any case, no doubt that Nabi was protected from all types of practices, all types of engagement. Okay, now actually getting to Harbul Fijar. So during this period of time, so Nabi was perhaps around 1415. Ibn Ishaq rahimahullah mentions that he was perhaps around 20 years old. Wallahu alam. In any case, perhaps that could be more accurately ascertained if we look into history very deep. Perhaps that could probably be ascertained. In any case, it's generally mentioned that he was about 14 or 15 at that time, which sounds more plausible because his role in that battle was not an active role, as we're going to see. So it's more suiting for a young teenager of that age. So what was this Harb of What was this war all about? So what happened is that the king of Hira, it's not Hira, it's actually, so someone else actually typed this in and I tried to correct it as far as I could before the dance, but still you'll find some, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, it was from other than Allah, you would find many, many discrepancies therein. Okay, so the king of Hira, it's a place in the northern part of the Jazeera of Arabia. And Nu'man ibn Mundir, there's a lot of history about him. He was a very powerful king and very tyrannical, and extremely, held in high regard and high fear as well. In any case, so he sent a caravan, which was known as Latima. Latima was it's a kind of a caravan, maybe a small caravan, several camels or what have you. And he sent in that caravan goods to be sold in Suq Uqal. The Suq Uqal was one of the big marketplaces which was around Taif. And that was a place not only where they used to sell goods and exchange it, but they used to also have the market of oratory. And that was the place where the poets would recite their poetry, and the khutbah, and the orators, they would, give their khutbahs, and people would, tell the storytellers and all that. As I mentioned, that was the greatest asset of the Arabs, was their language. And so they used to take that opportunity. So it was a very grand event. It was a very important cultural event as well as economic. And so Nu'man ibn Mundir had sent that caravan for goods to be sold there in Suq Uqad, and those goods being sold, they would buy other goods, perhaps leather and other goods from Taif that were particularly there, and bring them back there. That's how the trade used to go. They used to actually go to, for example, the Meccans would go to Syria or to Yemen, and they would buy the things that were indigenous there, right? They would sell their things and then buy the things that were indigenous, and then they would bring those things back to Makkah and either barter them or sell them, and that's how the trade used to go. So in any case, now being the tribal system, as we mentioned earlier, there was no central law, there wasn't any police, there wasn't any army, right? So it was a kind of a tribal free-for-all thing, the big tribe eats the little tribe. And so if you didn't have protection from a strong tribe, you were unprotected. And it was just like, in the ghettos of America, if you didn't have a gang on your back, there's no way you're going to exist. So that being the custom, so Nu'man ibn Mundir had delegated Urwa al-Rahal, he's known as Urwa al-Rahal ibn Utbah, from the tribe of Hawazin, to look after that caravan and take them under protection. So that means that he not only would be protecting that, but his tribe, Hawazin, would be responsible for that, if he has taken the jawar, as we say, al-jawar, taking responsibility to protect them. So now this didn't set well with the opposing tribes, the tribe of Kinana. If you remember, we talked about the various tribes. We had Hawazin in Taif, we had Kinana, which were there, and other places in Hijaz. And so Al-Barad ibn Qais from Bani Kanana, I think you didn't change I had made a correction, but I don't think you uploaded on this one.
I don't think so. That's what's.
Huh? Okay.
Is that it?
Ibn Qais, Kenan. Okay. Oh, that one's corrected, but this one isn't.
Oh.
Okay. So the people who are seeing here in the masjid, they're seeing the corrected version. The people on
On Zoom.
Zoom, unfortunately,
Sorry about that.
as we said, the human factor is always there. So in any case, so Al-Barad ibn Qais in Bani Kanan, with that, tribal, as we say, that asabiya, and that sort of tribal, preference. So he said, okay, what do you mean? You're going to protect this, caravan from we Bani Kanan? So Urwa said, yes, and from everyone else too. So it's just like, the gangs, the block on the shoulder, are you ready to knock it off? Okay. So now Al-Barad is now, waiting to, to take out Urwa. So Urwa proceeds with the caravan, protecting the caravan, and Al-Barad also took out, he left, to lay ambush. Urwa, ala ghaflatin, when he finds him, unaware and unsuspecting, so he's going to, he has the intention to take him out. Okay, so ultimately at a place called Tayman, which is, probably somewhere, on the way down from Taif towards Makkah. So Al-Barad actually was able to ambush Urwa and killed him. And not only that, it was also from among the sacred months, the Ashr al-Huram. And if you remember, now those who are following us in our Quran Dars, we talked about the Ashr al-Huram, and then even in Jahiliyyah, these months were sacred. You can't kill anybody, you can't have war. And they used to pretty much honor that. Okay? So now, not only he kills this guy, but he kills him in a month of Ashr al-Huram, in the sacred months. That was a big deal. Okay? So that's why this is known as Harb al-Fijar, because the Fijar was this, this audacity, to take life during the months of Huram, the sacred months, which, even the Jahiliyyah people, held in very high esteem and regard. Okay. So Quraysh were now informed about this Barad killing Urwa in the sacred month at Uqad. And so what did they do? So they set out in pursuit. So obviously, that's the way tribes work, right? You take out our man, we're going to take out your man. And if not, your men and your women and your children and everybody. War. So that is a call to war. So they set out in pursuit, of Barad and his contingent. In the meantime, Hawazin come to find out about that, his tribe, the tribe of Barad, the killer. And that, that Kinana and the allies of Quraysh, and Kinana was the ally of Quraysh, and so which also brought Quraysh into the conflict and all their allies. So here we have a conflict now. So ultimately, Hawazin came to know, they set out for them. And so the two contingents, the two hosts, met just outside of Haram, and they fought, obviously. And they fought until night, and then at nightfall, then the Quraysh, they entered into Haram, and those who were there, those who were Quraysh and those who were with them, they entered into Haram at the night, and in Haram, nobody had the audacity to come and chase them and fight in Haram, at least. Then for the next several days, that war continued outside the Haram. And so all the other tribes, and so the tribes, that were allied with Hawazin, they joined in with them, and the tribes allied with Quraysh, Kinana, they joined in with them, and it was a total mess, as tribal warfares generally are. Now, the Prophet ﷺ also attended this, being from Quraysh and being a Sqaim, and the most noble family. So obviously he had to be present in that war as well. However, he wasn't actually, according to what they mentioned in history, he wasn't involved in the fighting, which probably indicates that he wasn't 20 years old. Had he been 20 years old, he probably would have been involved in the fighting as everybody else. But being a youngster at that particular point, most likely, so he used to collect, yunabbil li'amami, they say. Yunabbil means that, when the enemy would shoot their arrows and the arrows would fall on the side towards close to the, to Quraysh. So Nabi would go and collect those arrows and bring them and hand over to his uncles who would, respond appropriately, sending them back from whence they came. Okay, so Nabi Sallallahu participated in that harb, and it said that he showed, extreme bravery and every other type of chivalry. That, of course, Prophet Sallallahu was the epitome of all human excellence. Okay, the next main event that they mention in Sirah that also took place during the early manhood of Rasulullah, perhaps in his late teens as well, was what was known as Half al-Fudul. And this is very significant, and significance is going to reverberate, with the situation of Palestine, that we're facing today. And we'll talk about that in conclusion, inshallah. So Half al-Fudul basically means a pact of the virtues. Fudul, fadil. So or fadila. So it was a pact of virtues among virtuous individuals. And we're going to see how it took that name. So what happened was, the context was, there was a fellow who came from Yemen, from a place called Zabid. And Zabid, actually, I've been past there. I haven't actually visited the town, but I have gone past there. I was in Yemen perhaps nearly 50 years ago. And Zabid is a place which was very, later on after Islam, and then the acceptance of Islam by the Ahl al-Yemen, it was a very famous place of ilm. And I think still there is, mashayikh and halaqat al-ilm. And most notably, someone that we might have heard, Talabat al-ilm, might have heard the Shar al-Ihya. There's a very famous commentary of the Ihya al-Din by Az-Zabidi. And he is from that place, from Zabid. So that's a place in Yemen. So this Zabidi came to Makkah, and he had goods, and he sold them to Al-As ibn Wa'il, who was a very well-to-do, individual from Bani Saham, who also, if you remember back, they were from the Confederates. They were not in, connection with, or with the Tayyibin, if you remember, the scented ones, if you remember that history that we talked about, that back, generations before. In any case, from Bani Saham. So this Zabidi being, from Zabid, from Yemen, and he doesn't have a tribe there, and he doesn't have anyone backing him, and he's not under the jawar or the alliance or the protection of any particular person or tribe there in Makkah. So as per the tribal, situation, the fellow is helpless. So he, sells the goods to Al-As ibn Wa'il, and Al-As refuses to pay him. When he goes and demands his payment for the goods, in so many words, get lost, And he refused to pay him, and, so what recourse does he have? So he went to his tribe, and he said, your man is not paying me. They also said in so many words, further, get lost, Moreover, they great objection on him. Why are you complaining? Who are you to complain? Keep quiet. So this poor fellow, what's he going to do now? So the Arabs, and the Yemenis, and I tell you something, this is something we see still in Yemenis. And generally Yemenis are small in qadr, very huge in himmat and determination, and having been in Yemen, and then while I lived in Saudi Arabia, I saw many Yemenis, mashallah. And Nabi Sallallahu, what he says about the people of Yemen, Iman Yemanian, Hikmah Yemeniya. Iman is Yemeni, Iman is from Yemen, and wisdom is Yemeni, and wisdom is also Yemeni. Nabi Sallallahu praised the people of Yemen, and as we remember in the very early lessons we talked about, the original Arabs are from where? From where? From Yemen. Jurham. If you remember Jurham, they came to Makkah. They're originally from Yemen. So anyway, so this Yemeni, nobody is ready to help him. So what did this Yemeni do? Allahu Akbar. And I can almost, knowing Yemenis, I can just see this fellow. He gets up on Jabal Abi Qubais. Jabal Abi Qubais is a small mountain that was just behind Safa. Here's the Haram, here's Safa, here's Marwa, okay? So there used to be a little mountain, and the present ruling family of Saudi Arabia have removed that mountain, and they replaced it with a huge palace for King Khalid during his time. And actually, I was there during the time when they built that, and we watched the whole. This is a mountain full of history, and we just were watching this being dismantled and blown up, and then this huge palace is erected on that. And the people of Jahiliyyah, the Arabs in Jahiliyyah, it was in respect to the Kaaba that no one would build a house above the Kaaba. To build a house above it's like I'm bigger than Kaaba. Now just look at what is there in Makkah. That's very painful. Anyway, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, excuse us and give us guidance. In any case, so now very interestingly, after that palace was built for Khalid, for the King Khalid, so now he's just about ready to go and inhabit it and try it out, and he dies. So he built that palace and he never had a chance to set foot in it. La ilaha illallah wa la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. In any case, so that Jabal Abi Qubais, there's a lot of history with that Jabal, Allah Akbar. It's no longer there. So he climbs up on this mountain and he's at the top of his voice. We talked about the Arabs, how their main, commodity, their main thing that they had was their language, right? So this Zabidi, he gets up on this mountain, as we say, irtijalan, just spontaneously, he just starts reciting couplets in his defense. I wish you understood Arabic, because it's just so beautiful in Arabic. So I've tried to actually translate that to some extent. So he shouted at the top of his voice, he said, "Oh, the family of Fihr." Family of Fihr, you Arabs who are from the lineage of Fihr, who is actually Quraysh, right? "Oh, you family of Fihr, respond to an oppressed in regards to his goods in the valley of Makkah, far from his home and his people. In the state of ihram and disheveled appearance and disheveled look." I have it better over here, yeah. "In ihram with a disheveled look, not yet completing his umrah, I call to the men between the hijr and hajri." Yeah? Ya lil-rijali bayna al-hijri wal-hajri. Al-hijr is, the part of Kaaba, which is, has the fence around it. And that used to actually be part of the Kaaba. And that's called the hijr. And the hajr al-aswad. So, you people who live in this place where there's the hijr and the hajr, you're from Haram. "Verily the sanctified, person who is sanctified and is pure and should be respected and honored, is the one whose honor is complete." His honor is complete. "And no honor for the cloak of the licentious traitor." Allahu Akbar. And he's shouting this poetry, and in Arabic it's just so powerful, And when he did this also, this was right after, like around the time of Shuruq, the time of sunrise. So right at sunrise, he gets up on Jabal Abi Qubais, and now the Quraysh, their habit was, they had some kind of rituals they used to do, and they would be sitting around Kaaba. So all the tribes would be sitting around the Kaaba, and here's this Yemeni in the break of dawn, and he's just shouting this poetry, right? So this is like a thunderbolt, on their heads. And, the Arabs, they have this, as we mentioned many times, their chivalry, their self-pride, priding themselves for the courageousness and generosity and so forth. So this fellow, what kind of generosity and kind of honor and karam do you claim to have? And here's a man who's been stripped of his rights, and he's oppressed with his goods, and he's not getting his due. So, as a result of that, let's go to the next slide. So as a result of that, some of the Quraysh responded. And among the Quraysh who responded, interestingly, were, if you remember, we go back to the history. We remember now that we had the Mutatayyibin, we had the Quraysh, and those, and among the Quraysh, Bani Hashim and the brothers of Hashim and those tribes that were collected, and they were united, on certain issues. And then you had those other tribes who were disunited. Now this continues to play, in Jahiliyyah up to the before Islam and also after Islam. It also has impact. As I said, it's important to know about those tribal, the relationships, the politics, if you will. Okay, so the uncle of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he responded, and that is Az-Zubair ibn Abdul Muttalib. He responded and he said, "This man is not going to be abandoned. We're not going to leave this fellow. He will be his issue should be addressed." So as a result of that, these tribes came. Now you who have Zoom, this is really messed up over here, so sorry about that. But here on the screen, we've got it correct. So Hashim, these are the tribes, the tribe of Hashim, Zuhra, Taym, and Adi. These tribes came together and gathered in the house of Abdullah ibn Jud'an. Now Abdullah ibn Jud'an was a fellow who was known for his generosity and chivalry. And actually, Sayyidah Aisha radiallahu anha, she even mentioned to Rasul alayhi salatu wasalam that, Ya Rasulullah, Abdullah ibn Jud'an, he used to, honor his relations, and he was generous, and he would feed people, and he did, and among the things was, host this very auspicious gathering in his house, and he did a lot of things like that. So is that going to help him? So Rasul alayhi salatu wasalam answered, no. Because he never said once in his life, Rabbil khilli dhanbi yawm ad-din, that he never, did this for the sake of Allah. He never said one day that, oh Allah, excuse me my sins, that was part of the culture. So just like we have here in America, we have here in the West, we have people who they have chivalry, they love justice, and that's a good thing. But is that going to help in the hereafter? It's only going to help when we have one in front, Tawheed. This is what the criteria that makes an action acceptable in the hereafter. So even though these were good deeds, and as I probably have mentioned in other times in other places, good deeds or good actions by non-believers will help them in the world. They get their recompense in full here. But in the hereafter, they will be sore losers. In any case, so in the house of Abdullah ibn Jud'an, this, gathering, you see, took place. And so, according to his custom, he prepared a feast for them and fed everybody. And then they discussed this issue. And they came to this very blunt and very, very powerful, pact. Very simple, very blunt, straight to the point, that no person here in Makkah is going to be oppressed and tyrannized. And in the case that happens, we are going to stand in his defense, whoever he is, wherever he's from. And whoever is opposed to it, it doesn't matter. Any oppressed, any person who's being wronged, we're going to stand united to, stand up for the rights of that oppressed person or persons. Now just look at that. This is when? Jahiliyyah, before Islam. Now, in that context, look at what we have today. We have people who for over 70 years, they've been oppressed on a daily basis. And where are we? Where are we Muslims? Where is all the neighbors and all the connected tribes? And by the way, this Bani Tamim, among the tribes which are there in Palestine, there's a lot of Bani Tamim, and other tribes of the Arab tribes that are there in Palestine. And these tribes have connection with the tribes all over the region. And what's going on? What's happening? Where are we? Where are the relatives? Where are the tribesmen? So look at in Jahiliyyah, what kind of chivalry, they displayed, and we as in Islam, and therefore, it's also mentioned, interestingly, they said that, that each tribal chief, who was there in that gathering, they pledged his allegiance. Not only that, they ratified it by drinking sacred water. They took water and poured it over the black stone. They had this deep regard, for everything about Kaaba, the black stone. They poured water over the black stone and collected it, and then drank that water to, further ratify, their determination to uphold this oath and this pact. And so, Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam, last slide. Okay, now 2 teenagers also attended this auspicious gathering. Who are those 2 teenagers? Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Muhammad ibn Abdullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and his best friend Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu. And next slide. And Nabi Sallallahu remarked about this advent, about this event after Islam, much later. He said, I witnessed a pact in the house of Abdullah ibn Jur'an, more beloved to me than a herd of red camels. And a herd of red camels is like a fleet of Mercedes or a fleet of, Rolls Royces. Okay? And he says, and if I had been called to this pact in Islam, I would have accepted. Had I been called to this pact in Islam, regardless of who was doing it, I would have accepted it. So lessons to be learned from this. Islam stands for justice, period. Islam is justice in its belief, in its belief sets, in its tashri'ah, in its legal system, in its social system, in its economic system, in its character, right? And so what does that mean? It means that all of that, and mind you, the oppressed, whoever he is, whether he's a Muslim or whoever he is, in the same Palestine where the Muslims are being treated less than animals. You don't kick your animals out of the barn, You feed your animals, you're good, because they're gonna be useful for you, right? The same Palestine, when it was ruled by Muslims, not only Palestine, the whole region. If we go back in Jewish history, we'll find that the golden era of Jewish history of achievement was under the Muslim rule. The achievement that, their physicians and their scientists and whoever, right? Their golden era was under the rule of Islam, because Islam protected the rights of everyone. Nabi Sallallahu said in his dying moments, Ahl al-Dhimma, be careful of the Ahl al-Dhimma, be careful of the people of the book whom have paid you jizya in return for your protection and your, taking care of them. And so they had the best times of their lives. They were treated more in more justice and more equity than at the hands of their owners. And therefore, at the time of Qadisiyah, in Hims, which was a stronghold of Jews and Christians, and Abu Ubaidah ibn Jarrah, radiallahu ta'ala, who was the commander-in-chief at that period of time, and he collected the jizya from the Ahlul Kitab. And now he's been called by Sayyidina Umar radiallahu to proceed from Hims to Qadisiyah. So he returns on the jizya back to the Jews and the Christians, saying that we took this jizya, this tax from you, in return for your protection, looking after your needs, and protecting you. Since we're leaving, we're not going to be able to fulfill that side of the agreement, so we have no right to keep this money with us. So they returned it back to them in full. The Jews and the Christians they proceeded along with Abu Ubaidah out of Hims with their Bibles and their Torahs in their hands, and said, we won't allow Rome to come, because they used to be ruled by the Romans, yeah. They said, we won't allow Rome to come back in here until you return. We won't accept anyone except you. So amazing how the tables have turned, So in the same Palestine, the same Palestine where Jews, Christians, and Muslims lived, as one family. And this is very well known. People who lived in Palestine. Therefore, the original Jewish people who lived in Palestine, they don't buy into this whole Zionist thing in any case. They don't agree with it, and they don't support it at all. In fact, they're against it. And they are also, they're also tyrannized as a result of that. So now just look at this. So what is the lesson? Islam stands for justice. Whoever is wrong. We see many instances in Islamic jurisprudence where a Muslim against a Jew. Sayyidina Ali radiallahu ta'ala. One Jewish fellow steals his, something from him, and he catches him with it. And then he brings him to the court, and his own Qadi Shurair, who was set as Chief Justice by Ali, and he's Amir al-Mu'mineen, by the way, at that time. He's the most powerful man on the face of the earth. But he has a claim and he brings it to the court. So Sharia says, okay, Ali, where is your proof that that actually used to belong to you? He said, I'm Ali ibn Abi Talib. You know, I'm the cousin of Rasul. He didn't say all of that, but I mean, just, the situation speaks for itself. I mean, if he's not going to tell the truth, then who would? But he had no witnesses. So his own Qadi, his own Chief Justice, who he placed, right? He says, sorry, this was in the hand of the Yahudi, and actually something is there in somebody's hand then apparently it belongs to him. Otherwise, why is it in his hand? So unless you have proof to prove otherwise, as we say, the hukm bil-dhahir, so it's going to be him. And so his qadi gave the qada that the property will remain with that Yehudi, with that Jew. That's okay, fine. So be it. That's the law of Sharia, I accept. This Yehudi, after seeing all of this, knowing full well that he actually stole the thing, and this is the Amir al-Mu'mineen and his own Chief Justice, they decide in my favor and against. He accepted Islam. So this is the justice that Islam, you see, is about. And now this justice, not only, our own people, we're not even observing this, among our own selves, much less other people, So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq and take this lesson. This is, as Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam says, regardless of who was involved in that, which people, which tribes, where they were, who they're from, because they stood for a universal principle of justice. We as Muslims also stand for a universal principle of justice for whoever, whenever, wherever. Is that clear, everyone? May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us that sense of justice and practice it and be the means to, attract the entire, world community to that, universal justice, which is Islam. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us all tawfiq. So perhaps we went a little bit longer than as we usually do. But such a beautiful, Sirah of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, we should be able to, continue. People spend their whole nights, on their iPhones and on their, trash and filth, so we should spend, and we change the night by the night. Why did we change this? Because generally, this is Friday night. It's Thursday night, but it's actually in Islamic, in Islamic calendar, it's considered Friday night. This is the very auspicious night. And so there's nothing more auspicious that we could do than involve in, remembering the history of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So any questions or any comments? We're all okay? Anything? سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك والسلام عليكم